Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever wondered why, after weeks or even months of silence, someone who once left you in confusion suddenly comes back like nothing happened? Why a man who ghosted, walked away, or needed space reappears in your life the moment you begin to breathe without him? It's not just coincidence, it's not just timing. And no, it's not always love. It's about energy, it's about power, it's about what happens when you stop waiting and start healing. See, the silence you think is empty is actually the loudest message you'll ever send. When you stop reaching out, stop checking in, stop needing validation from the very person who wounded your spirit, you change the dynamic, you shift the balance. You start reclaiming every piece of yourself that you gave away without return. And whether he realizes it or not, the moment you detach is the moment he feels the void. And in that void, he remembers, not always who you were to him, but how you made him feel. When you emotionally detach from someone, especially after experiencing a painful breakup or toxic cycle, something powerful starts to shift, not only in you, but in the dynamic that once held you hostage. Emotional detachment isn't about playing games. It's not manipulation or coldness. It's about finally choosing peace over chaos, truth over fantasy, and self-respect over temporary comfort. It's about making a conscious decision to stop watering a connection that never poured back into you. When a man sees you emotionally check out, when he no longer has access to your emotional availability, your reactions, your constant reassurance, he's forced to sit in silence with something he's been avoiding, himself. That silence, it screams, it echoes. It starts to dismantle the illusion of control. Because when someone thinks they can leave and come back whenever they please, what they're really counting on is that you'll still be there, emotionally waiting, energetically tied, mentally hoping. They don't expect your healing. They don't expect your growth. They don't expect you to choose you. Your emotional detachment is the moment he realizes the energy supply has been cut off. No more texts asking where things went wrong. No more late night calls that end in confusion. No more apologies you're desperate to hear. That space, while painful at first, becomes sacred. It becomes the container where you rebuild your identity, not around him, but around him. It's where you finally acknowledge what you allowed, what you tolerated, and what you're no longer available for. When you take your power back emotionally, something inside him shifts too. He starts to feel the distance in places he never expected. The silence makes room for clarity. He starts to see where he fumbled, where he took you for granted. And whether he returns out of guilt, nostalgia, ego, that return is not about you being wrong or him suddenly waking up to your worth. It's about the fact that your absence disrupted a cycle he depended on. Men often return when they feel your emotional detachment because it forces them to confront the version of you they never expected, the one who no longer needs them to feel whole, the one who's no longer fueled by the hope that he might change. And this new version of you, strong, centered, emotionally self-sufficient, either draws them back in or terrifies them. Because now, you've flipped the script. You're no longer the one waiting, you're the one choosing. And that's the power in emotional detachment. It doesn't just reveal his intentions, it exposes your evolution. You didn't just survive the silence, you thrived in it. You used it. You became more than the girl who once begged for clarity. You became the woman who no longer needs closure from someone who couldn't handle your truth. So when he returns, it's not the same story, because now you know better. Now you see through the patterns. Now you hold the pen, and that changes everything. There's something profoundly underestimated about silence. We often think words are what move people, what bring clarity, what resolve tension. But silence is where transformation begins, especially after no contact. When you remove yourself from the equation and stop trying to fix, explain, justify, or hold together what's falling apart, you allow the natural consequences of someone's actions to finally speak for themselves. Silence is not the absence of communication. It's the loudest message you can ever send without saying a word. When a man is used to you always being there, responding, reacting, explaining, defending, checking in, he begins to associate your presence with emotional safety. Even if the relationship was chaotic, even if he took you for granted, your energy was consistent. And consistency, even when toxic, creates comfort. But the moment that consistency is disrupted by silence, by distance, by boundaries, something inside him starts to shift. He begins to reflect. He might not even understand why he's thinking about you again, but suddenly you're in his thoughts, not because you reminded him, but because you stopped reminding him. That's the power of silence. It creates space, and in that space, reflection is born. For the first time, he's not caught in the loop of conflict or the push and pull dynamic. He's alone with his thoughts, alone with the reality of what he did. And while not every man uses that space to grow or take accountability, many do experience something that feels an awful lot like regret. Regret for how he handled things. Regret for the words he didn't say. Regret for letting someone so genuine slip away without fighting harder. But here's the truth, most men don't realize what they had until they're forced to live without it. Not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. See, when a woman pulls back her energy, it disrupts the emotional rhythm he's gotten used to. Maybe he thought you'd always be waiting. Maybe he assumed your forgiveness was infinite. But when the silence lingers, when no texts come through, when the phone doesn't ring, it confronts him with a version of himself he's been avoiding, the one that failed to love you properly. And that confrontation, it's uncomfortable. It breeds a kind of restlessness inside him. A need to make it right, not always because he's ready to change, but because the silence makes him uncomfortable with his own actions. But here's the twist. The regret he feels, it's not just about you. It's about what he lost within himself when he lost access to the way you made him feel. You see, you weren't just a person in his life. You were a reflection of what he could be, more vulnerable, more loved, more understood. And when that mirror disappears, when he no longer has someone reflecting back the best parts of him, it causes a ripple effect. He starts questioning his choices. Maybe he replays old conversations. He scrolls through your photos. He looks at your glow up, your silence, your evolution, and realizes that what he walked away from might have been the very thing he needed all along. But let's be real, not all regret is noble. Sometimes it's ego. Sometimes it's the discomfort of seeing you happy without him. Sometimes it's the shock of watching you do better after he assumed you'd crumble. Silence is powerful not just because it creates distance, but because it exposes truth. His return doesn't always mean transformation. It could mean discomfort. It could mean he misses the control. It could mean he just hates being ignored. But either way, the silence forced the reflection, and this is where your power lies. Because while he's wrestling with regret, you're rising. While he's reflecting, you're healing. While he's questioning everything, you're becoming unshakable in your worth. Silence doesn't just wake him up, it wakes you up. It teaches you the value of not reacting, the power of not chasing, the strength in letting go without closure. And most importantly, it shows you who people really are when they no longer think you're available to fix their mess. So when he comes back, don't just listen to his words. Listen to the silence that came before them. What did it teach you? What did it reveal? What did you learn about yourself in the quiet? Because reflection goes both ways. He may be coming back because of his regret, but you're standing taller because of your growth. There's a sacred moment in every woman's healing journey when she finally decides enough is enough is enough. It doesn't happen in an explosion. It's not always a dramatic ending. Sometimes it's in the quiet moments, the nights when she deletes the draft she almost sent, the days when she doesn't check his page, the mornings when she wakes up and breathes a little deeper because, for once, her peace matters more than the answer she'll never get. That's the moment she stops chasing. That's the moment the shift begins. We're taught from such a young age to pursue closure, to seek understanding, to hold on to potential as if love lives in what could be instead of what actually is. So we chase. We chase validation, we chase approval, we chase a version of love that only existed in our hopes. But chasing love means you're running after someone who's not walking toward you. And every time you chase, you shrink, you compromise, you bend. You lose bits and pieces of yourself trying to hold on to someone who keeps showing you, through their inconsistency, through their absence, through their silence, that they're not choosing you fully. But the moment you stop chasing, everything changes. Everything changes. You shift from being the one seeking worth in someone else's recognition to the one recognizing your own. You go from questioning your value to owning it. You begin to understand that someone who truly values you doesn't need to be convinced, doesn't need to be chased. Because real love doesn't need pursuit. It requires presence, intention, and consistency. And if you have to run after someone to keep them in your life, they're already gone. When you stop chasing, you step into your power. And that power is magnetic. Not because it's a tactic. Not because you're trying to get them to come back, but because authenticity and self-respect attract. People feel it when you no longer need them to validate you. They notice when you no longer beg for their time, their attention, their crumbs of effort. And ironically, that's often when they return. Not because they've changed, but because they feel the energetic shift. The control they once had over your emotions, it's gone. The predictability of your reactions, it's disappeared. And now, they're left with the question, what happened to her? What happened is, you woke up. You realized your worth doesn't live in someone else's ability to see it. You understood that chasing doesn't prove your love. It only proves your lack of boundaries. You got tired of feeling like a placeholder in someone's life while they figured themselves out. You stopped making excuses for someone who never showed up fully. And that choice? That decision to no longer chase? That is what puts you back in control. Not of them, but of you. Because when you stop chasing, you create space. Space to heal. Space to see clearly. Space to attract people who meet you where you are, not where they left you. And in that space, you don't just rediscover yourself. You reinvent yourself. You begin to speak differently, walk differently, think differently. You don't tolerate the same old patterns because now you've seen what self-abandonment cost. You've lived in the exhaustion of trying to fix what someone else keeps breaking. And now you know better. The most powerful love you'll ever experience isn't the kind that makes you chase. It's the kind that lets you stand still and be met. It's the kind where your peace isn't disturbed, where your boundaries aren't tested, where your energy isn't drained from proving your worth every single day. And once you've tasted that kind of love, even if it starts with you giving it to yourself, you'll never beg for the bare minimum again. And here's the beautiful irony. When you stop chasing people, the right ones chase purpose with you. They don't run from the hard conversations. They don't disappear when things get real. They match your consistency. They respect your standards. They show up. Not because you chased them into your life, but because you made space by letting go of those who weren't meant to stay. So yes, men may return when you go silent. They may come back when they feel the distance. But the question isn't if they'll return. The question is, will you still be in the same place when they do? Or will you be too far gone in your growth, too rooted in your peace, too full in your self-worth, to ever shrink yourself again? When a man reappears after a period of silence, it's easy to mistake his return for growth. You might think he's finally realized your worth, finally matured, finally come to terms with what he lost. And while sometimes that's true, more often than not, men come back not because they've evolved, but because they crave the comfort of what once was. It's not about the love they want to give. It's about the emotional safety they miss, the peace you brought. The way your presence made life easier, more secure, more forgiving. Familiarity is powerful. It gives people a false sense of intimacy, even when they haven't earned access to your life again. Just because someone knows how to reach you doesn't mean they know how to love you. Just because someone remembers the way you laughed, the way you cared, the way you softened every hard moment in their life, doesn't mean they've developed the capacity to give that kind of energy back. And when a man returns to you out of familiarity, what he's really returning to is the version of you who gave without boundaries, who poured without expecting reciprocity, who stayed even when your soul was tired. This is why it's so crucial to discern between a man returning out of change and a man returning out of comfort. The difference shows up in his actions. A man who's grown will approach you with humility, accountability, and a deep awareness of what he broke, not just in the relationship, but in you. He won't just say, I miss you. He'll say, I've done the work, and I understand what you deserved. He won't expect immediate access. He'll respect your process. He'll be patient. He'll be consistent. That's growth. But a man who's chasing familiarity, he shows up with nostalgia, not depth. He talks about the past as if that's enough to rebuild a future. He might say the right things, but when you listen closely, he still wants the old version of you. The one who was available, forgiving, emotionally open, and overly generous with your energy. And if you're not careful, that kind of return will trick you into thinking it's love when it's really just habit. It's really just loneliness. It's really just him reaching for what's easy instead of doing the hard work of becoming the man you needed all along. C. You can become someone's safe place without them ever becoming yours. You can give warmth to a person who only knows how to take. And when that person disappears and reappears, the real test is whether you've changed in the meantime, whether you've healed enough to ask the tough questions, whether you've grown enough to protect your peace, whether you can look at him, not through the lens of who he was, but who he is now, and decide whether he's worthy of the woman you've become. The truth is, familiarity feels like love when you haven't experienced consistency. But love without growth is a trap. It's a loop that keeps you emotionally stuck, constantly hoping for change while sacrificing your own evolution. It convinces you to romanticize the past, to minimize the pain, to ignore your gut, all for the chance to relive a moment that was never sustainable in the first place. But now, you've done too much work to fall for a rewind button. You've cried too many nights, asked too many questions, begged yourself to let go for too long to go back to something that still hasn't changed. Growth means you don't allow someone to re-enter your life unless they've shown up differently. Not with promises, but with proof. Not with words, but with patterns. And if all they're offering is the comfort of what used to be, that's not love, that's emotional recycling. The man who truly sees you, who has grown in your absence, who has reflected, healed, and evolved, he will come back not to take from your light, but to match it. He won't be threatened by your independence. He'll be inspired by it. He won't need you to shrink to fit into his life again. He'll expand to meet you where you are now. And that's how you know the difference. Because the ones who return from growth will want to rebuild, not relive. They'll ask what you need now, not what you used to settle for. They'll honor your journey, not just miss your presence. And most of all, they'll understand that real love isn't about comfort. It's about evolution. There's a sacred transformation that happens when a woman begins to truly heal. It's not loud. It's not always visible. But it is powerful. It is powerful. Healing doesn't mean you forget what happened or that you stop feeling. It means you start choosing yourself in ways you used to choose others. It means your standards sharpen, your intuition strengthens, your boundaries become non-negotiable. And suddenly, not everyone who once had access to you still qualifies to be in your space. This is what most people don't understand about healing. They think it's about getting over the pain, or moving on from the person. But real healing, it's a rewiring of your entire system. You stop reacting the way you used to. You stop chasing closure. You stop explaining your worth. You stop holding space for people who disappear when you need them most. And when that healing becomes real, your energy changes. The way you speak, the way you show up, the way you carry yourself. It tells the world, I am no longer available for what once broke me. And here's where it gets real. When men come back after no contact, they don't just meet the woman they left. They meet the woman you became. And that woman isn't soft in the same way. She's not cold, but she's clear. She's not bitter, but she's better. Better at recognizing red flags. Better at protecting her peace. Better at saying no without guilt. The woman you've become isn't hard to love. She's just harder to manipulate. Harder to access. Harder to impress with the same tired tactics. When you heal, you no longer crave the validation that once kept you stuck. You don't need someone to come back and say, you were right. You already know. You don't need the apology. You made peace with their silence. You don't need the closure. You close the door yourself. Healing gives you that kind of quiet confidence that can't be faked. And it radiates. It intimidates, especially those who expected you to stay broken, confused, or dependent. The men who return after no contact often expect to find the same emotional doorway still open. They knock, assuming you'll answer with open arms, with the same softness, with the same hope. But what they don't realize is that healing locks that door, not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. Because now you understand that access to you is a privilege, not a right. And that privilege has to be earned, not begged for, not manipulated, not guilt-tripped into. You've learned that peace isn't something you're willing to trade anymore, not for half love. Not for inconsistency, not for promises without follow-through. Your healed self doesn't care about potential. It looks at patterns. It doesn't settle for almost. It waits for aligned. And this is where your power fully emerges, because healing gives you the patience to pause before letting anyone back in, to ask the real questions. Does this person truly see me? Have they done their work? Are they ready to love me the way I love myself? And if the answer is no, you walk away, not because you're heartless, but because you finally know your worth. You finally understand that someone coming back is not the same as someone showing up. That a text at midnight doesn't equal transformation. That apologies without change are just noise, and that love, real love, doesn't require you to abandon yourself to keep it. The truth is, your healing journey filters out those who only knew how to love the broken version of you, the one who overgave, the one who tolerated too much, the one who believed potential was enough. But now, they can't reach you, not because you're hiding, but because you've risen. You've created new standards, new environments, new expectations. You've become someone whose peace can't be bought with sweet words or second chances. And that's what makes you powerful. Not because you're unreachable, but because now you choose who gets to reach you. You choose who enters your life, who stays, who gets the blessing of your presence. And that choice, that's everything. So when they return, because some will, ask yourself, are they coming back to a version of you that no longer exists? Or are they stepping into the life of a woman who knows exactly who she is and what she deserves? And if it's the latter, remember this, your healing is your protection. It keeps out the noise, it keeps out the chaos, it keeps out everything that once convinced you to doubt your own voice. And most of all, it keeps you aligned with your highest self.